It was almost as bad as the All-Star game on Sunday, Mike. What, Mike?
Nothing's that bad.
What do you? I mean, do sports fans just expect too much of the NBA for the All-Star festivities,
No.
or do you think
the NBA is in an embarrassing position? They put themselves there. I'm not going to, as I have now grown fond of saying, I'm not going to care more about your product than you care. And if the players don't care, why should I care? And the players haven't cared. They didn't care for about 10 years worth. They didn't care, and now you have to run out there and put these phony attempts to obscure the game. You know, make it a variety show hosted by Kevin Hart. No. It's a waste of time. The NFL did this with the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
And it had to go away. It went away. That's all you can do with it.
Yeah.
So the Pro Bowl went away. The NHL seems to have discovered something that does work. They had 10 million people in the United States and Canada watching Saturday night. The NBA doesn't have the stones, doesn't have the gonads to put out there to say to the players, if we're going to have this and put our name on it, we're going to have something that people are proud of. Because I'm just going to tell you this. There's I'll narrow it down a little bit. So there's a Chicago area player, Hall of Famer, who I talked to last week, and I said, when are you going to the All-Star game? And he said, I'm not. And I said, when have you ever missed the All-Star game? And he said, I haven't, ever, in like 40 years, ever. So I'm not wasting my time with this. And this guy played in some All-Star games. And I said, you're not going. He said, I'm not going. And to me, that was an indictment. Because and then I talked to a couple of other Hall of Famers who were like, dude, I don't even watch this anymore. And they feel embarrassed about it. And they said there's no, they used the word pride. They used it. I'm talking about guys in the Hall of Fame. And so I'm influenced by what they think. And just on my own, independently, I'm like, I'm not watching this. And I used to think there was nothing cooler than All-Star Weekend for years in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And so now we reach the point where players are so large as global icons that they can do exactly what they want. And if they don't want to play, if they want to stand around with the lob passes and think that's an All-Star game, then that's what they'll do. And there's no, Adam Silver won't call them on it. I mean, he was angry last year, notably angry.
Mm-hmm.
People wrote pieces about it and reported it, but they didn't do anything about it. I mean, they did this other thing. And then they interrupted the game for 12 minutes. I mean, I'm all for paying homage to TNT, except Ernie, Charles, Shaq, and Kenny, they're going to be out there. They're going to still do the game.
Of course, yeah.
This is not an obit. They're not dying. Shaq just signed for $15 million last week. So they're not going anywhere. What are you doing?
Mike, was it last? I said that, and you have obviously followed this much closer than I, but I was trying to think about the last time I saw like a decent effort, and it had to be probably the last time Kobe played in an All-Star game. Is that fair?
Probably. Maybe. It certainly has not been the last 10 years.
Why?
And Kobe, because guys make so much money now, they don't want the notion of not getting hurt rules everything. And hockey players don't make enough money to have that leverage. NBA players do. So they just say to Adam Silver, we're not doing that. We're not playing us against the world. They don't want anything competitive during their 8-day break, their hiatus.
Yeah.
And they've made that known.
It's interesting because
the league is held hostage by that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you last week. We ran out of time, and I don't mean to trivialize this.
No.
But what would the late commissioner, I wrote this down, WWDSD, what would David Stern do if, in fact...
He would call people in a room and say, we'll just disband the whole thing, and nobody will get any money for anything. And we'll just disband. We're not going to have this. Or he would have called in. I mean, it helps. I mean, commissioners know stronger than his strongest players. And when your strongest players are, over time, Russell, Magic Bird, Jordan, Kobe. When your strongest players are those aren't the only guys. I mean, there's Dumars and Isaiah. There's Malone and Stockton. Mm-hmm. There's there's guys who would enforce. There's Charles Barkley. There's guys who would say, no, tell us this is what we're doing. But if you don't have that, and they don't seem to have that now, guys are just, they're going to make their $70 million on the back end of their contracts, and Adam Silver doesn't have players. Because if LeBron wanted to set the tone for that, it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me if LeBron wanted to set the tone for that, then it would be set.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sensing that. I'm sensing Draymond Green is the guy who was out there willing to say what needs to be said, but Draymond doesn't have the capital to spend as LeBron would, or LeBron and Kevin Durant. Maybe he does have as much capital as some of those players, but they don't. It doesn't matter to them. If it doesn't matter to them, that rules the day.
Conversely, you mentioned, Mike, Draymond maybe not having enough influence with some of the players around the league to really get an idea to change surrounding the All-Star game. LeBron, at the last minute, ducks out. What was your thoughts on that? Should he have informed the league earlier, or do we give him a pass?
He said he wanted to play, and he's going to try to play, and he didn't know until that morning that he couldn't play. I'm going to take LeBron James at his word. LeBron has never done things. People can say what they want about taking my talents to South Beach. That was not dishonoring anybody. People may have disagreed with the way he did that. I don't actually. I thought it was fine. But if that's the only outlier for LeBron's behavior over decades, then there's nothing there. And so I'm going to give LeBron James the benefit of the doubt with his assessment of how he felt. The whole thing's unfortunate. The whole All-Star weekend. Mac McClung is the only thing that I paid attention to from All-Star weekend. That was it.
Mike, is it symbolic of a bigger issue that the league faces?
Yeah, yes, but it faces the issue with his most ardent fans, which is I'm not going to watch anymore.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'm turning it off now, and that also goes to the point of I'm not coming. I'm not paying $2,000 to get to the arena and find out half the people I'm paying to watch are not playing, not suited up. And so, but players they don't have to care about that because their money comes from the billions of dollars in media contracts. So is it a problem? If it doesn't affect the bottom line, is it a problem? You can conclude no. If guys are making $70 million on the back end, is it a problem? Maybe not. Apparently not.
So, look, if they got rid of the All-Star weekend at this point, I wouldn't care. But I do care about wanting to watch the league. And
well, we're watching now. Tommy, the tough thing is starting tomorrow night.
It gets real?
Friday, because it's a sprint. There's only 30 games left. This is it's like a college basketball season now, except the 30 games are going to be compacted into basically 6 weeks. So we're going to go from February 20th to April 13th, or 7 weeks. We're going to go 7 weeks. And by the time we get on the other side of this, by the time we get through and get to next week, we're going to be looking at the 1st of March to April 12th-ish. We're going to be looking at 5.5, 6 weeks that the NBA season is going to be a full sprint, where people are going to play if they can, because that's going to determine whether they make the playoffs, and that will determine what people think of them.
Is there
their future salaries and their legacy, and all that people care about will be determined in that 6 week period.
No doubt. Is there enough popularity, do you believe now, watching this sprint that is justifiable for those that are paying these broadcast entities that are paying these huge prices? Is it worth their money, or is this?
It'll have to be. That's all they're going to get. They're not getting anything else. They're not going to get all the stars playing every game in November, December, January.
My point is that, make hay now, because the way this league is going, when it comes time, and fortunately for the league, I'm assuming that these broadcast deals have some lengthy time left on them.
They just signed it. They just signed one a day and a half ago. The ink's not dry.
It feels like, it feels like there's going to be some regret from some of those broadcast entities if, in fact...
They could have just had the regret. Then why did they have the regret 3 weeks ago? We didn't. They didn't. These are the most famous men on earth.
Mm-hmm.
along with the top 15, top 40 soccer players. That's not 40. Top 25 soccer players.
Mm-hmm.
These are the most famous people. It's not the heavyweight champ anymore, or the people who comprise the welterweight and heavyweight championship divisions. That's what it was. I mean, that's what it was when it was Ray Leonard and Hagler and Duran and Burns and Benitez, and then at the same time Tyson, and you had that. You don't have, so boxing is taking itself out, completely out. And the most famous people on earth, the bankable stars, are global basketball players and global soccer players.
So there's no way to fix this for the average NBA fan because
not now. Nope. There's no consequence. What's the consequence?
That's my point. Is that the consequence?
$70 million on the back end.
It would have to be that once you get to the end of these monster deals, that those that are paying for them don't want to re-up because they don't think they're getting enough return on their investment.
They just re-upped the day.
So that's my point. Is like there's no end to this for quite some time.
No, none in the foreseeable future. None of my lifetime. No.
Wow.
And so that's one part of the reason that you're going to have an interesting conflict, really, when it comes to WNBA salaries. And you've got, you got a rookie out there who's changed sort of the whole dynamic of women's basketball, is making $83,000, but you got this 3-on-3 league or whatever it is, people making $200,000. So what's going to happen there? People talk about it as a work stoppage in the WNBA.
Yeah.
And that looks entirely possible to me.
No, it's a fascinating litmus test, Mike, that you bring up there regarding the WNBA.
But isn't that all about revenue production? Like if the revenue that is produced that can support the salaries,
Tommy,
then it will.
That's what, because that's the old model that you and I have been looking at all our lives. But if Dove and Maybelline are paying as part of a bigger point, and they're willing to pay, regardless of what the eyeballs are or the standings in the seats, they're willing to pay. It's part of a cause, really. It's causal. And then what is that going to mean? So in other words, if the dollars are there from sponsors who want to make a larger point culturally about women's basketball in the United States of America, and you've got one league sanctioned partnered with the NBA that's paying, that's paying about a third of the salaries as this new entity, which I couldn't even tell you the name of it. But I read just yesterday they're making an average of $200,000 a player.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? This is where you get. I mean, golfers may have a handful of golfers accurately identified their leverage points because of the Saudi money available. Does that mean eyeballs are watching? No, it doesn't. They're not watching live. And it's not fannies going through the turnstiles. It's not. If there's an entity willing to pay a certain amount of money to make a point. So live exists. And another group of golfers, the PGA, it looked like they sort of evaluated their own leverage. Maybe not, because you got the PGA ultimately to go to these elevated events, which shot up your own pay scale. But golf's got something similar going on. So apparently, look, Hulu gets it right when they say what pays off is live sports.
Yeah,
it still does.
From willingness to pay to an unwillingness to pay, the Cubs were if you believe all the baseball bigwigs, Mike, and we certainly do, Jeff Pass and Buster Olney, the Cubs were the fourth-place finisher when it comes to Alex Bregman. As a Cubs fan, what were your thoughts when you saw Bregman sign with the Red Sox and Jed Hoyer thank Tom Ricketts for allowing him to spend $115 million that ultimately they're not going to spend because Bregman did not select their deal?
Well, my first thought was $40 million a year is a lot for Bregman.
Mm-hmm.
That to be honest, my first thought when I just saw the number, I don't know. I wasn't focused on what the number was going to be. I wanted the Cubs to get him and spend enough to get him. That was my first typical fan reaction. And then when I started thinking, what is Judge making?
Aaron Judge
getting?
per year, yeah, it's a little more than 40.
Okay, so you're going to tell me that Bregman, who is a really nice player, and I understand defensively you want him anchoring your infield. I get it. But, man, $40 million for Bregman? And they only have him for 1 year maybe. I mean, he gets to opt out after each of those 2 years. I sort of backslid on that one. Not thinking, like, can you not develop or find a third baseman as valuable as Bregman, particularly at the plate? I don't know.
Your fate rests with rookie Matt Shaw, and if he can't play, they've signed Justin Turner today.
Yeah, Justin Turner who can bat. You know what's interesting? And so I have a much harder time figuring out what I'm going to think of Justin Turner. Justin Turner, who is 40 years old, who could fall off. He could just fall off. He could fall into, off a cliff in terms of performance. But he can play some backup first base. He can back up at third base. He can DH. He's a good clubhouse, locker room guy at a time in which you really maybe could use that if you think you're going to contend for anything. So I don't know what – I have a harder time – and by the way, they paid $6 million for him or whatever it was, but my first reaction was $40 million is too much for Bregman. And I wanted the Cubs to be all in. And then when I saw the amount in the headline the next day, I was like, $40 million for Bregman, really?
It's a fair concern.
Hey, I want to go back to the NHL or the Four Nation face-off.
Yeah.
How into the Saturday night game between the U.S. and Canada were you, Mike?
I couldn't see the Saturday night game because I was busy doing something else family related. But I'm going to watch the Thursday night game.
Yeah.
And I watched, the two early games of Finland and Sweden. I watched those, and I found it an attractive watch. I didn't find it as compelling I did not find it as compelling as a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup playoff. I didn't. Now, obviously, a lot of people did, and 10 million people watched in the United States and Canada on Saturday night. I'm going to watch Thursday, but I think the NHL also got lucky. I mean, suppose it's Finland versus Sweden. Then what?
Right.
Yeah.
Then you're not getting that. So they got a fortuitous, I'm not going to say, bounce, but, let's hold our horses, because if that's the matchup, we're not all rushing to the TV to see that. And the other thing is, if anybody who drops gloves, you're gone. You're suspended. You're out. You're out. Like the Olympics. I've covered Olympic hockey going back to 1998 when the NHL stars were allowed in the competition. And it's some of the greatest play I've ever seen. 98-02. It was stunning how great the action was. And I got to see North American dilution. I got to see the Kachucks dropping gloves. I would suspend people for that.
I applauded them, not suspended them, but I'm a caveman.
People said that the NHL couldn't go forward and have exciting products without that 15 years ago, and they did exactly that.
They did after the first 9 seconds, and then they all settled in, and it became a game of skill.
I don't need to see the first 9 seconds. Well, there was great clean hitting in that game that resulted the rest of the game, from what I'm told. I didn't get a chance to watch. But my point is, when I say 15 years ago, the Don Cherries of the world, 25 years ago, said the NHL was not going to field a successful product, an attractive product worldwide, without fighting. And they promptly did away with goonery in the NHL. Goonery. And you don't need it. Don't tell me that I'd rather watch two thugs slug it out than see Connor McDavid. That's a lie. It's a disservice to the men who play and have skill at that level.
Yeah.
So I don't need to see that against the United States. The United States cannot see that.
The only thing I would say to you is you got 59 minutes and 51 seconds of real skill, and you did get. But I get what you're saying. I think that the point is that the NHL did a pretty nice job giving their fans a product that was signidigantly more appealing than the NHL All-Star game.
They figured it out.
Yeah.
They figured it out. Again, they got a little lucky.
Yes.
But it's okay to get lucky when you're actively trying things.
No, you're right.
The NBA
and Mike,
is
I
not
think
actively trying things because they're scared of their constituents, their players.
I think
the league is afraid of a handful of players who they don't think will give their blessing to something more competitive.
I think you hit the nail on the head as well, is that money is an issue because, as Meller was saying, like, look, the top earners in the NHL, the best of the best,
12 and a half,
are making 12 and a half, 13 million.
Fractional.
Yes.
So,
that's a ninth man on an NBA roster.
Right.
And there's also, Mike, a culture to hockey, too, where the best player, if he's got a sore shoulder, if he walks into his locker room, the last thing he's going to tell his teammates is, hey, boys, shoulder hurts tonight, I'm not going.
Yeah.
You'd be laughed out of the room.
I'm not afraid to hear in the NHL. And it's not going to be, when money changes everything. If they start getting paid $70 million in the back end, then you might hear that. Because you didn't hear that. Listen, maybe this is a good way to wrap up. So late in a Bulls season, when the Bulls had the first seed, so it was either 97 or 98. The Bulls had the first seed wrapped up, and they're playing a meaningless game like game 81 or 82, and Michael Jordan walks in the dressing room, and there were guys with ice packs on. And there was nothing at stake. There was nothing at stake. Everybody knew. And by the way, nobody in Chicago was clamoring for these guys to play because you were going to the playoffs the next week. And everybody wanted the Bulls to 5-peat or 6-peat, whatever it was. Jordan walks in the room, and guys have ice packs on. They're not dressed for the game. They're like in sweats and stuff. They got towels on. And Jordan goes, "What are you doing?" And he's like, I'm not playing tonight. We don't have to go." And Jordan goes, here's the deal. I'm playing tonight because there's 20,000 people out here in United Center. I'm playing, and you're playing, and you're playing. And he pointed to each guy's nose. I know this story from several guys in that room. He pointed to each guy's finger to nose and said, "You're playing, and you're playing, and you're playing, and get your uniform on and get yours on because I'm playing." They all played.
Yeah.
Now, you can also go look up. Steve Kerr, we love Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr's a Hall of Famer over and over, easily. Steve Kerr only played 82 games in one uniform. I'm virtually certain of this. He played all 82 games every season with the Bulls, I think. Look him up. Stacey King, 82. Okay? Guys, BJ played 82 no matter where he was. But those guys played 82. Because you had a guy walk in the room and say, "You're playing, or you're playing."
He
Or
played.
we will fight right now.
He played 5 seasons with the Bulls. Excuse me, is it 5?
It's 5.
Five
it's
seasons
5.
with the Bulls, and there was only one season where he didn't play.
Wow. That was
the strike year.
He played every single game, like you said, Mike. 82, 82, 82, 82, and then 50 in the strike shortened season.
50 was all. 50 was the total.
Exactly.
He played 100% of the game. So it was not just the NHL. That was the NBA, but that was 25 years ago.
No, it's so right.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Real quick, before we let you go, Mike, because you brought up Mike, obviously everyone in Chicago loves Michael Jordan stories. You may not have had a chance to catch this because it debuted last night, but have you heard about the We Beat the Dream Team doc that HBO just debuted last night? Grant Hill was obviously the primary, I think, driver.
I know of it. I was there.
I was going to ask you, Mike, listen, it's 90 minutes. It's breezy. Anybody who remembers the Dream Team, or if you're unfamiliar with the Dream Team, I highly recommend it. I'm sure it's going to be available on HBO. But can you just share whatever story you want about the NBA Select Team beating the NBA Dream Team?
Was Gary Payton on that team, too?
No, Gary Payton was not. He was not till 96.
No. Gary Payton was already – he wasn't – maybe he wasn't – anyway, Chris Webber was on that team, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill. I mean, that's 3 guys off the top of my head. I don't know who else. I don't know if
Allen Houston was on that team.
Allen Houston.
Rodney
Great
Rogers.
Guys, by the way. Great pros. Guys who became terrific pros. And a lot of them are around basketball right now, obviously. As
Jamal Mashburn and Penny Hardaway.
Jamal Mashburn, terrific guys on that team. So they come out of there's a reporter, Sam Smith was there. So there's several of us, and we're waiting outside, and they come out and they say they won the game. They won the scrimmage. And we're like, what? We beat them. And this is like, I can't tell you how impossible it was to believe, but they did win. And then the Dream Team guys come out, and they're like, they're downcast. But I remember one of them, Michael said, be here tomorrow. Be standing right here tomorrow in the same spot where you are now. And it became like, why? And he said, here's the deal. Because they're not going to score. And you say, and we all said, David Dupree, Mark Heiser from the LA Times, David Dupree from USA Today. There's a handful of us who are all standing there. And Jordan goes, what blankety blank don't you understand about not going to score? And I think at one point it was like 13-0 or 13-1 the next day. It was just it was just that sort of thing. The greatest games, if you talk to those guys, and I've spent my life hanging around, some of those guys. And Charles has great stories. If you ask Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan and David Robinson, and I don't know what John Stockton thinks, Karl Malone, I know what Magic thinks because we talked about it ad nauseum. If you ask them about the greatest games they've ever played, just forget the uniform.
Yep.
Those are some of the practices, the scrimmages. If you ask them about the greatest efforts or defensive effort, when Scotty and Michael would team up on somebody and say, you're not getting the ball across mid-court. And he couldn't.
Yep.
And so those guys, Allen Houston and Jamal Mashburn and Grant Hill, they have wonderful stories about that whole back-to-back thing. And I can't wait to watch it.
Mike,
you'll love it. A lot of years now. I can't wait to watch
Mike,
it.
You'll love it again. It debuted last night on HBO, so anybody who's a fan of that, I highly encourage you to check it out.